Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to preview the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Exciting matchup in Kansas between Kentucky and the Jayhawks. Ken Pomeroy has Kansas as about a 3-point favorite. You've got a potential matchup between National Players of the Year, Oscar Tshiebwe of Kentucky, Ochai Agbaji of Kansas. This one is just going to be one you want to watch. It's going to be appointment TV all the way around, Blake.
Yeah, I mean, it's always that way when these two play for the most part. You kind of know what to expect. This is going to be a great atmosphere. Anytime Kentucky comes to town, again, it doesn't matter where it is, but especially, I mean, in Kansas, it's just going to be a really fun environment. And I mean, look, these are two teams that at their best, I mean, they can go, right? Like that's just, I
Yeah.
mean, when these two are on, they can like they can put up a lot of points. I think that's what we're going to get in a game like this. I think this is going to be a pretty high scoring game. Um, Hopefully that's not because of free throws, but hopefully that's just a very free flowing type of game between these two because I think that's how you want it. Obviously, here's the deal. I mean, we talk about Kentucky all the time, and what makes Kentucky go is Oscar Tshiebwe, and I think that's where in a game like this, he's gonna have to really, again, be he's gonna have to be what he's been all season long, and I think that's how Kentucky gets a path to victory here. And we know as well, you look on the perimeter, and I think how do guys like Severe Wheeler and those kind of guys play? Can Kellen Grady hit shots? I think that's another important element of this game where he's going to have to probably knock down some outside shots for them to be able to win here. So there's a lot of fun aspects to this game, and from a matchup standpoint, you can look at it. I think Kentucky overall is probably more consistent on the defensive side than maybe we've seen with Kansas at times this
Yeah.
year. And I just think that again, that's probably because, Oscar Tshiebwe can help you do a lot of things on that end too. But also Kentucky's, I think they do a pretty good job all around on defense. I think that they have figured that part out. Whereas maybe early in the season you saw some slipping, just kind of not quite there yet. But I mean, look, these are two teams that quite frankly could meet in the national championship and it wouldn't surprise any of us. So from that element, I mean, we'll break down some of the stuff here, but it's like, gosh, these two are they're so good when they're good. And I just think that this is going to be a really great matchup to see how it plays out from several of these standpoints. When you look at just the different numbers. So
Well, I think the biggest thing in this game is whether Ty Washington for Kentucky plays a lot. They're a different
yeah,
team with him on the floor. I want to say there was a 29-point swing in the Auburn game from the time he went out. And he didn't play against Mississippi State. Kentucky hung on and won that one in overtime. And they're not the same team without him. Sheboy was asked about him this week. I think he said he expects him to play. No, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's the official word as we do this on Thursday morning. But I think to me, that's the one thing you're watching before you really make up your mind about how this one goes. I think we're going to do this presuming he'll play, but you have to throw that out here.
yeah. If he doesn't play, I mean, it's tough because Kentucky hasn't been great on the road. How many times we keep saying this, right? It's just they've not played great on the road this year, and they haven't had that many opportunities, right? I know it's easy to go back and say, well, they were playing great at Auburn before the injuries, and they were, but I think it's like, individual game, right? Like you put that into the setting that it was. But if you look at some of the other things, as we said, they won at Vanderbilt. That's fine. They pulled out that win at A&M, but I didn't think they played great there. Didn't play great against LSU earlier this month. So that is something that I think as well, Kentucky kind of maybe that's a good thing, right? Like they got kind of a glimpse of what they're gonna maybe see on Saturday when they played at Auburn. It's like, all right, crazy atmosphere. Just kind of going into the belly of the beast here, and yet I think that if Washington doesn't play, the challenge just becomes much harder because this is a Kansas team that man, they're good. And like I said, I mean, there's no other way to put it, right? Like we know what you're dealing with this team. This is a team that's good on the perimeter, this team that's good inside. They've just got a lot of things that they do well, and I think Kansas is one of those teams that, obviously if you look at efficiency wise, they're very efficient on offense, but I think they're another one of those teams that they don't really tend to beat themselves, I guess is the best way to put it. They just tend to kind of put themselves in a position to make the plays to win. And obviously, they've had a lot of close games. And I think that's something too that goes into this is Kansas has proven that it can win some of these close games, whether that's the one against Texas Tech, whether it's the one, well, I guess Iowa State wasn't long ago, the game against Oklahoma on the road, even the one against Kansas State, right? I mean, it's just like they have found a way to win a lot of close games. And so I think for Kentucky, it's kind of been different, hasn't it? Like they found a way to win that game against Mississippi State, but for the most part, if you look at Kentucky's body of work this year, it's a lot of blowouts.
Yeah,
So I
and
think
and,
that's
and
what
most of those at home.
right, exactly, and that's where I think this thing really gets interesting is when Kentucky finds itself in that position. Let's say with 5 minutes to go and it's a 2-point game, they don't have sort of the background that a Kansas does this year of saying, "All right, we will find a way to win this game." And again, it's not saying Kentucky hasn't because they did it against A&M. Obviously, they had their chances against Auburn. They won at home in overtime against Mississippi State, minus, as we said, dealing with injuries and all that. So it's not like they can't do it. But I think that is something that which I would expect nothing less. I think this will be a close game the entire way. But that's where, man, Kansas has kind of proven itself in a lot of those spots this year, and they just kind of one of those teams that's going to show up and say, "Hey, we may not play 100% every single, possession. We may not be as great as we should be on every single possession, but when it comes down to it, we're going to find a way to win." And they've done that for the most part this year.
Well, the home road thing. Let's start on the Kansas end. Kansas almost never loses in that building. Hasn't lost in that building this year. I mean, the sky is blue, water is wet. This is no breaking news. Kentucky is 1-3 on the road. One of those came back on December the 11th at Notre Dame when I don't think Kentucky was really a team with the identity that it has now. You saw Washington take on a bigger role and start to blossom. A loss at LSU back when LSU was healthy on January the 4th, where that building was just lit, which of course it'll be in Lawrence too. The loss to Auburn, which you talked about, how the Washington injury may have impacted that one, and then the A&M one, which they won just a week ago. So really not a big body of work for a Kentucky team on the road that frankly has been, I'd say, forming an identity before. Well, some of the games were played before it formed an identity, I guess is a good way to say it. Again, a lot of that identity is dependent on Washington, but if you want a full picture, I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to if you're Kansas, if you can limit Oscar Tshiebwe's opportunities, from an offensive rebounding standpoint, a second chance opportunities, which they have the size, I think, to be able to do that. Obviously you've got someone like David McCormick in there and 6'10", and those kind of. So I think that's a big part of this for Kansas. I think that's a big key to winning. And again, I mean, it's like, not many people have been able to do that with Sheepway. So it's not like that should be the expectation. It's just
Yeah.
at a certain point, you just have to, kind of do what you can with him. And otherwise, this guy can just take over the game. But, he's also someone that he has familiarity with Kansas, obviously coming from West Virginia. And so I think maybe that's a little added chip on his shoulder here, too, is, he's played against this team before. And so I think this is just, yeah. I think Kansas has the edge no matter what. I think, though, if Washington doesn't play, I think that's where
Yeah.
that puts a lot of pressure on Severe Wheeler. And again, that also puts a lot of pressure on Kellen Grady to make shots and probably he's going to need to make several shots from
Yeah.
outside, I think, for them to have a chance here. So that's where, and look, that's not like a surprise for us to be saying that. It's just I think that is where that comes in. Is if Washington doesn't play, this is already going to be a big test for Kentucky. But if he doesn't play, I think it just puts so much more pressure on Wheeler and Grady, and going up against this Kansas team. It's going to be a challenge no matter what. So I give Kansas the edge here, and I just think that right if you flip it, we may have a different discussion. Although I still think the discussion goes back to Ty Washington. So
Yeah, a few more just points of information here. You look on paper, like, is there something a team does really well that another team can't handle? Kentucky, the number one offensive rebounding team in the country, according to Ken Palm. And Kansas is what? I think, 140 and giving them up. Kentucky rebounds at a 39% rate, which is absurd on the offensive glass, and Kansas gives them up at 28%. So, and that's where foul trouble may play in. Again, you're in your building. The Washington thing you mentioned, again, that's the overriding factor to all this. But I think the Grady factor too, that's what I was trying to get at. He's a guy that is taken backstage for them at times, right? And when you're on a team with Sheboy and Washington, and they've got other parts too that work on given nights, Keon Brooks can be their go-to guy at times when they need him. And, I mean, the Kentucky's got talent, again, nothing new. But they haven't always needed Kellen Grady. But he's a kid who scored 2,000 points in 3 years at Davidson. People thought he might be the preseason player of the year in this league. I think he was in the discussion. And you saw him step up, hit a couple of big three-pointers at Mississippi State. So that might be the X factor. I still think, I'm with you. I think even with Washington healthy, it's a tough task to bite off in that building just because nobody goes there and wins. If Washington's not healthy, I think you have to concede it to Kansas. If he is, I still think Kansas wins. But if this goes differently, I think that Grady might be the guy that we say, okay, that's why it went differently, because he's an elite spot-up shooter. And I know at least on the SEC level, we don't see a lot of those guys anymore. As good as the league is, there's not another Kellen Grady in the league. And you see him make a difference at times when he's really needed.
Yep, he has to make shots. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Even if Washington does play, like, Grady's going to have to hit shots. And then, Kentucky's, I looked at, they're 13th nationally in offensive rebounds. They average about almost nearly 14 per game. So
yeah,
that's where, for Kansas, if you can cut that in half,
you win the game.
You win the game. I don't want to say easily, but I think you feel pretty good about your chances there.
So you're feeling pretty good about Kansas if the line is around 3.
I'm going to take Kansas here. I think, again, if we're recording this on Saturday and we know whether Washington plays, I think it's maybe different, but at the same time, I think because this game's in Lawrence, I'm probably picking Kansas no matter what. So
don't see either team running away from the other one either way.
No, I don't think so. Unless Kentucky's just not hitting shots, right? Because then I think you can look at that scenario. Because again, like we mentioned, it's guys are going to have to step up if Washington's not in there. So
well, and here's the nightmare scenario for Kentucky. Xavier Wheeler has been prone to rolling ankles, running into picks, whatever. It's just not been his year in that regard. And if Washington's not available, that's their top 2 point guards down. That's a big if, but you can't watch a Kentucky game anymore without watching guys go down. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, not ideal, especially heading into this kind of matchup. So
yeah. All right, tell folks about our partnership with Action 24/7.
Yep, put the link in the description below. South14 is the code. Click on that. Use that code, South14, and they'll match your first deposit up to $800. So just check out that in the description in the video below.
Okay, more of these coming. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe. That helps us out a bunch.